we're not going to see it on
living.
Facebook
We
for a
made
few
it to the other side.
So it'll take a second for it to. People will see what we're saying delayed a number of seconds from when we're actually saying it. So if you're watching it, you know, you'll just see us delayed. Don't listen to that, or you'll hear questions from a couple of minutes ago. So we should probably talk about where we met. I think that's kind of a great intro to the story of Christianity and you know, feelings about it.
Yeah,
met at Burning Man. So you know, and I don't know if you remember the funny story I told you about initially meeting you guys.
Dev's mentioned something about it, that you were kind of, you know, you heard that I was there and we were going to try and find each other, and we'd come to the tent to have you know, in fact a friend of ours had Kevin wanted to have his dreams interpreted. So
right.
and I was drumming in the kind of in the coffee tent.
So but here's the funny part about that is as I went to go look for you guys at Giggsville, and you know, and I didn't know what Giggsville looked like at the time, you know, and quite frankly, Giggsville is kind of a funny thing, right? What I discovered was a burned out car, and I thought, this is a camp.
You know, Phil, you know what I love about Giggsville? I mean, it is a Nordic camp, but it's wild. But they have a great little slogan. They used to use it quite a lot. Giggsville, where bad ideas get a second chance.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I went looking for you, didn't find you, and then one day, hey, Hope Deifel, by the way, says, "Hey, friends," and Jim Hogue is on as well. So
Hoagie.
Yeah, that's right. So when it was Deb and Rainbow and Kevmo, you know, they came to the dream interpretation tent, and I was in the Coffee Dome drumming, and I didn't, you know, I hadn't met them yet. But as I'm in the Coffee Dome drumming, somebody says to me, they walk up and they say, "We think we have, there's some witches here." They didn't say we think, they said, "There are some witches here, and we need you to come do dream interpretation." And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm the guy from Salem who knows a lot of witches, but come on, you guys can do this. And they got kind of nervous about it, like, "Oh, you got to come. We know they're witches." So I went. I'm doing this dream interpretation with these three people, and I'm looking at them thinking, there's no way. There's no way. Yeah, the girls are dressed in black and white, and they got dark hair, and the guy's kind of got this, you know, rough look, like he, you know, maybe some rowdy druid would wear, but he's got a cross around his neck. And, you know, at the end of this interpretation, Kevin's doing the dream, and I asked him, so, what is your religious tradition? And as soon as I said those words, his face went like, what? Well, you know, as soon as you say religious tradition and somebody doesn't, you know, they kind of don't understand it, they're not pagan, right? So, and he says, a Protestant, I guess. and then I asked more, and it turns out Deb's the pastor of the tribe. and you know, I just walked up to those people at the camp, and I said, "Talk about blowing it! You sent me to some pastors to interpret dreams because you thought they were witches. What's wrong with you guys?"
I just think there is a problem of discernment, isn't there? Sometimes.
Yeah. So I couldn't love you guys more after that. That was perfect. You know, you know, you knew how to live in that world.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that's where you and I met, Burning Man, which I think says a lot. At least, you know, for my heart, that says a lot for your missional capacity that you go to a place like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love beauty. I love search and truth. Why wouldn't you want to go to Burning Man? It is a beautiful event.
Yeah,
Crazy,
yeah, yeah.
but there's real, genuine beauty and search going on there. It's really, yeah, it's good.
Right, right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. Um, now, in light of having that kind of approach to Christianity, and like we talked before we came on live, I've been reading through the beginning part of your new book, Reframation, and in it are these thoughts about pilgrimage and places like Burning Man as places where we discover our faith, perhaps a little more deeply, or we can discover something about it in untraditional venues, right? At least untraditional for evangelical Christian. Um, that you also stated in that book that you went to those places during seasons of struggle, or a reframing of your own faith. Um, what what's reframing your faith? What is it that made you created that struggle in the first place in order to search for reframing it?
Well, let me just give you just a shot of the picture. So you can see that, so that you know the term we refer to, reframation. Kind of
Right.
made it up. It kind of refers to this idea of taking another look, putting a new frame on things or a new lens, looking again at old things. The thing is with a frame, if you reframe a picture, you don't change the content of the picture, you change the way you see it. So for me, I mean, the whole thing, I think the last few years have, for me, disclosed something of the bankruptcy of broad evangelical faith. Now, why I say that is, I think it's clearly reasonably evident that we really don't know how to discern good and evil. We've capitulated to political ideologies on both sides, but primarily I'm referring to kind of a capitulation to Trump particularly.
Right.
For me, Phil, the issue is if the church doesn't look, act, and sound and think like Jesus, then I'm not so sure if it's the church anymore. I'm saying we're meant to look something like our founder. We're meant to be images of Christ. We're meant to. So if we get all excited, I mean, it's right to hold your nose and vote for any party, and ask forgiveness afterwards. But to get excited about a man like that, to get excited about that, means you don't understand Jesus. It's simply there's no, because Jesus doesn't look like that. You know what I mean?
Right,
just
right, right.
Jesus, and you look at that. And I'm not being political here. I'm actually being theological. I think for me, it's a theological problem.
Right.
It means we don't know what Jesus looks like. And I think for me, that's just been a kind of I'm tired of crampy, grumpy, bad-tempered, moralistic religion. And so for me, Reformation was an attempt to explore metanoia myself, repentance. What does it mean to unlearn in order to learn again? And and I would say, it's not a negative book at all. In fact, it's a book that points us towards a greater experience of the God who is ever greater.
Right.
So you'll get there when you've just started the book. It's quite a complex journey of like trying to see again and realize actually we've limited God down to this narrow little doctrinal thing.
Right.
Lots of poetry. We don't know how to read the Bible properly because the Bible is lots of poetry, but we don't know how to read the darn stuff. So we're missing all the information. So much of what we've received is such a cramped religion, and I just think we have to protest in our time.
Right, right. So I'm going to throw in a couple statements here from people who are watching. So Christina Keith Perry makes the comment that the container changes the contents, or she puts it with an exclamation mark. The container changes the contents, baby.
It does. So, like I think we can be, I find myself like, now more deeply convinced of genuine orthodox biblical kind of faith more than ever before. So for me, it's not that I'm not, so one of the things about the book, Phil, is this. It laments what we call reductionism. Reductionism is a social science or scientific term that means that we've taken kind of like an idea and made it into everything. It's kind of like reduced kind of very complex idea into something that can be contained. Reduction. Now, in the Bible, the term for this is called heresy. Heresy in the scriptures, if you just do some research, actually means that the heretic has actually got hold of something, has identified, rediscovered something that has been overlooked or found by other people. Every heretic's got a verse of scripture, and they've got a rationale for it, a theology for what they're doing. And what they've done, they've taken a piece of the truth that's part of the complex whole truth, and then they've become very, very excited about it, but they've forgotten that it actually it becomes the whole truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then they keep going down, down, down. So we end up arguing about smaller piece of truth. We got 25,000 denominations. We have different interpretations of every possible doctrine. Everyone's set up against each other. And the thing is that they're all true. Actually, the answer is always bigger, not smaller. So we need to kind of look in the other direction. And I think this is what the book's about. It's about looking up again to see, to take a look at God it blows our minds. We should have to, we're completely mind blown by who God is and what he's done in Jesus. And, we've made the gospel into a little 4-step formula, whereas the gospel is much, much bigger than something addressing a small aspect of the human condition called guilt. It addresses every aspect of the human condition. So we've made God, gospel, and people into small little things, and we've got to change. Yeah, it's time for reformation.
Right. So applying these thoughts to the current season we're in, and clearly we're in some kind of change or shift. We don't know what life is going to quite look like post COVID-19, and that might even be somewhat of an assumptive statement. Post COVID-19, right? In the light of that, these changes, I'm not convinced Christianity's ready to, in the same way you're saying it. I'm not. It's a broad stroke statement I'm making, but it doesn't mean I'm talking about every single Christian church or pastor. But I don't know that I'm convinced that Christianity and evangelicalism as a whole is ready to adapt in ways that are beneficial for society and faithful to the gospel. What do you think about how things are right now?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I've spent pretty much most of my adult life, and certainly the last 20, 25 years, kind of being a missional activist, trying to get the church into the mode of sentness. Now, the word sent is English, but Latin is missio. Missional means sent, that we're sent as kind of with a certain agency in the world that we're meant to go, right? And it's been very, very hard work. I think people kind of see that it's very much part of the scriptures, sentness.
Yeah.
The Father sent me, so I sent you. But the pattern of church doesn't easily allow them to do that, because we were saying, come to us, whereas, God's saying, go out into the world, be representative, do your thing. So the interesting thing is it's been hard to do that. There's been some success, but very little. Overall change. Now, God has sent us. I mean, here we are now. It's not like God came up with COVID and so, but I actually think we now find ourselves pretty much sent into the neighborhoods. And with the less and less likelihood that we're ever going to go back to that form of church that we came from, it's hard to imagine that will ever, in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think there's no way backwards to that. The economics won't support it. It's usually quite expensive to the building and the programming and all that stuff. The Sunday or the weekend, it's expensive. So I don't think that even once we get over, get immune to the virus, there's no way back. The Great Depression is coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to really, really push it. And here's the thing. Everyone now is placed in homes and, now in the neighborhood, perfectly positioned to actually be the church. It looks awfully like the Book of Acts. And if you think of it like a situation in the Book of Acts where, where persecution comes upon the saints in the church in Jerusalem, and that causes everyone to scatter. And darned if that's not the means by which the gospel spreads. There is the chance of it. I don't think every church is going to go there, but I think enough are. And I think actually we might find that we discover ourselves in a new way. I suspect we will. Liminality, yo.
Mm. So, are you seeing anything right now that's giving you some hope of missional things taking root during this season?
Yes.
You got some examples?
Yeah, actually, one of them is I spoke to the, engaging. I won't give the name of the church because it's just a little early. But there's a church, a really large church in New York City, which is not a home for large churches. This is probably the biggest in mega church in Manhattan. The boroughs have bigger ones, but the Manhattan this is a church of probably about 2,000 people on the weekend, Pentecostal. And the founders of this started it on this idea of what they call dinner church. Right? They set up dinners.
Right.
It's very biblical. It's communion. The original communion was a dinner, and they actually they've got about 80 of these around the city, and it's the dinner church. And this is even while they were pumping, on the weekends with the classics service. So the leader says, "Oh, we know there's no way back to that. It's gone. We don't even expect it to return." But so we're going to just lean into this. Now they are using, using media to project. They have now over 20,000 people watching on weekends. 20,000.
20,000.
And then what they do is they push people, I mean this in the best sense, they're pushing towards the house churches, or we could call them micro church or whatever it is, but they call them dinner church, which is led by 4 leaders who've been prepped all along the way. And it's scalable because there's 4 and their idea is to multiply this thing out.
Right.
This is one thing they are now seeing. They are, in a very short term, they're beginning to kind of experience themselves as a kind of a movement forward. And part of the challenge is to build a complete philosophy, a model that works with that. So that's a very good example, and that's just early days. Not all will go, but some will, and man, they go viral. It's like we're living in a time of virus, and it's a bad virus. It's bad. People are dying. Right? I was living in New York.
Right.
I am living in New York.
Right.
But here's the thing. There's a good virus called the gospel, and it spreads virally. It goes person to person, and it's exponential. And darned if we might not learn about viral behavior from the bad virus, that we might actually become the good virus we intended to be in the first place.
It'd be nice to have a better virus, wouldn't it?
Yeah, good virus.
So J. Cole, one of the guys who's watching, asks this question that I think may tie in nicely to the dinner church concept, although it's challenging in that regards too. What is the church called to do in regards to our brothers and sisters struggling on the streets?
Oh, I think, I mean, we clearly have our obligation to care and love. Um, um, and you asked for example, I'm giving you dinner church. Now, the question is what to dinner church. This happens to be a New York church. So it
Right.
has to take into account poverty. Although Manhattan, it's a big, it's 8 million people, and so no, I'm sure So do churches have an obligation to care for people, to pastor, to care and to feed and to protect and to advocate for the poor and needy who are most affected? Yes, of course. And again, maybe again through neighborliness, where
Right.
we're back engaged in our settings again. Maybe just by reaching out to neighbors, being, adding salt to the neighborhood, disinfect the neighborhood. It's a good opportunity to actually be the church. The problem is that most Christians are not prepared for this moment. They used to see Christianity as a pendant, not something they have to do themselves, particularly. So the Sunday Monday disconnect. Now we're having to experience ourselves as the church in the setting which we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
Yeah, lockdown.
Right.
But you can't lock the gospel down, right? You can't. You can't.
So
It'll do its work, right? It will do its work because it's the word of the Lord, right?
yeah. Steve Pate makes a comment here that no wonder it's one of the four things the disciples devoted themselves to in their early days: breaking of bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of the most.
we've made it into a religious thing. I've never really. Maybe I come out here and say I've never really felt deep connections to church ritual version of what could be called Eucharist or or communion, whatever you want to call it. Partly
Right.
because I think it limits the sacrament to a church-based ritual. I believe that all of life can be sacramental, and that why would you just choose one? And secondly, I think the original intent was that as they go house to house having meals with each other, that was the sacrament, having meals together,
Right.
not just a symbol of a little thimble, if and then a little piece of dried bread. It was actually a meal. It was originally set within the context of the Passover, which was last week. And I
Right.
think we've lost the kind of real human connection that takes place around meals. And I believe a meal is the most powerful um, missional tool, because it's
Yeah.
a humanizer. Yeah. So yeah, it's rediscovery of the dinner table, which I think is really important. Now, right now we can't because we're all locked down, but that'll soon change. And then the chance of the church to really be something in I think it's promising. Well, I think I think God is. If you think about in history and the Bible itself, God seems to have to push us into the liminal, difficult, risky, challenging, dangerous place where we risk disintegration. But in those places, actually, the downloads of revelation coming that take, Abraham sets off on a journey. He doesn't know where he's going. Takes the whole family, which is kind of apparently about 80 people. It's kind of a serious extended family. He can go to war. Then
Right.
you got Moses and people of Israel as they escape from the superpower into the desert, another liminal space. We know about liminality in deserts. What
Mm-hmm.
about you just pick any of the stories of the prophets and they're being outcast, Jesus and the 12, the reject, ends up on the cross. Paul, I would say the whole book of Acts, all about a liminal, and then revelation comes in the liminal space. Now, why would we expect any different? So this is a liminal time for us, right? The church is people, let alone the
Mm-hmm.
church. Everyone is in a liminal place. Now, but we should be prepared for this. Deep within our narrative is in deep within the church's narrative is a to thrive in the liminal place. Cross, good example of that. But Exodus is a classic, which is part of what we've just said right now. So yeah, no, we should be up for this, and we will be.
Right. So Yeah. So in terms of other things going on, I've got a friend who is um, speaks Farsi. He's from Iran. Moved here when he was a teenager, became a Christian, and he's got 4 different groups from around the world that he's meeting with. Um, obviously on, I think it's on Zoom, doing Lectio Divina, meditations on Scripture, and
Great.
he's making the statement that what he's seen more happen in those places than he's ever seen in his many years. He was at one point the head of Foursquare missions Middle East, here at the Foursquare offices in LA, and he's saying, "Wow, it's just taking off." And there are stories of incredible things happening just like this in the Middle East. One of the fastest growing churches being in Iran.
Yeah, and it's underground, so it has to, be the small, more adaptive micro.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. It can exist in America as the micro church. Yeah, we're gonna find out, right?
Yeah. Perhaps we've been too excited about our own success for too long, because if we can't replicate what we're doing anywhere, it's not not applicable everywhere, right? It then becomes gospel. It's good for rich white Americans who like big buildings, and I found myself. So I had a little online. It wasn't quite a debate, but it tossed back and forth with a friend. I made a comment about places like Notre Dame. Notre Dame goes up in flames. We all are struggling with it and feeling like, wow, what a great loss. I felt like that, right? Look at this architectural wonder.
Beautiful.
Great loss.
It was a beautiful game.
Yet on the other hand, if we tried to build it today, what would we say?
Probably spend your money elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah. What about the poor? All these people that are hungry. I mean, they had to be living right around Notre Dame when it was being built, and so the same struggle was going on then, and it reminded me. I found myself in the tension of feeling like, do I fit into that place where we build monuments to the prophets who our fathers killed? Is it that kind of thing?
Irony.
Yeah. And we're living in a season in which, in a different way than the wild architecture of the Gothic, medieval, and Renaissance Christianity, we have our own massive things that we've built, and perhaps we put it into television or into a crystal cathedral or something like that. But still, we have those things. We have we put it into mega churches, and it still is. Is it similar to that? And because of that, is it distant from the gospel?
Yeah. Phil, because I'm pretty sure you read The Forgotten Ways, but so The Forgotten Ways is a book I wrote to kind of get a handle on the nature of the church as transformative movement. It can go scale, a huge long-term impact. It's China. Actually, I think there's the situation in China. Christianity had been in China for 2,000 years. Thomas apparently come east, planted what became known as the Nestorian Church. Had been there for 2,000 years. It hadn't thrived terribly much, but it had presence for a long, long time. But the church in China largely was westernized because the Western powers colonized the East, and then they bring their churches with them. So at the time of Mao Zedong, there was an established church of apparently about 2 million people in China, established. And Mao Zedong comes in, you're thinking now 1950, then onwards, and he pretty much obliterates that church. I mean, all the external forms, the institution of the church is completely obliterated. The leaders taken out, the foreign missionaries cast out, buildings confiscated, seminaries closed down. People then are
Right.
persecuted, and they're told that if they don't scatter, he's going to crush them like little ants, right? And he begins to persecute the church in probably the most horrifying in all history. That church grows from 2 million under
Right.
those conditions to 120 million in 80 years.
Wow.
So what the heck's going on there? You know, is it that somewhere in the midst of that they discovered themselves in a new way? That maybe for those centuries of institutionalization had obscured this, that this is not the real church, you are the church.
Right.
One of the phrases I love from one of the underground Chinese church movements was, every believer a church planter. Every church a church planting church. Now, what they meant by that is not what we mean by church.
Of
Because
course.
if we use the word church here, we think of buildings and $1 million budgets and all that stuff. No, that's not what they mean. They
Right.
mean maybe 20 people meeting together, illegally, affirming each other in the faith and working and multiplying, the gospel working out through. Yeah, no, we can do that again. Makes me hopeful. I think it's our deepest instinct, bro. Our deepest instincts is that. So I think we can discover this again. I think we will.
All right. So I want to go back to a statement that Jim Hogue makes in the comments here. He says that most modern evangelicalism is designed to shelter people from liminal experience.
Yeah. Safe places, yeah. To make safety. You don't normally associate most churches with kind of risk-taking and adventure, do you? It's middle-class toying, safety obsession.
Right.
And no, he's quite right there.
So, how do we break out of it?
Well, I think we are now. It's gone.
I can't help but wonder if we're going to discover who has idolized that safety.
Oh yeah.
And re-embed themselves into it in another way. The changes that could potentially occur through something like COVID-19 here are pretty dramatic. How are we going to treat one another on the street from now on? We greet one another with a with that brotherly kiss. Is that going to be there? Is the hug and the handshake, the friendly interaction going to happen, or have we moved away from that to such a degree that we have an psychologically unhealthy distance, and simultaneously, does that bring some diminishment of the gospel?
I think yes. I think many will be like that. They'll go into a cloying safety zone. But the thing is, again, it's interesting. Like in a time of crisis, it's amazing how it brings out the best in human beings. Not all human beings, but it can. I just think again, New York City, September 11th, kind of this big disaster, attack on the city. It brings this kind of hardened, gruff kind of city, and they hugging and kissing every year now, in remembrance of it. There can be ways. The tsunami is another good example. You remember this was 15, 20 years ago, that big, horrible event that killed over 250,000 people.
Right.
And it brought the world together in acts of generosity that have been unseen ever since. Catherine, the hurricane, can bring out the best of people. So no, I think again, yes, I mean it can bring the worst, but it can also bring our humanity to bear.
Yeah. So I don't want to put you into a a prophet seat or anything and say, so what do you see for the church? But I guess I'd put it in terms of what would you hope? I can imagine that your brain is, mine certainly is, turning in respect to the season that we're in, and um, uh, and the potentials, both positively and negatively, that we have in the future. What kind of hopes do you have?
Yeah, well, I do hope that this time in which we find ourselves can God's people. I mean, He knows His people. Um, we know Him. Will discover the resources in themselves that will more than recover. Again, and we might very much recover our forgotten ways. And become a movement again. That would be the great hope. I do feel, though, that, and I am no statistician, and I don't, this is not prediction, I just feel, my gut says that about a third of the churches in America that we know now as kind of congregational Sunday, that kind of thing, I think won't make it. Not in that form anyway. Most churches are about 2 offerings away from bankruptcy anyway. I just
Right.
can't see many of them making it through. There will be some that make it through and still be, the church that we know it. Maybe another third.
Right.
But the other third, I think maybe can become something else, And that
Right.
really, that is much more similar to the kind of church that we see in pages of the New Testament.
Right.
The church in China, the Celtic mission, which I know you have a great connection with,
Right.
we can thrive again. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. So I can imagine that a couple of the pastors who were recently arrested for holding services when they were told it was dangerous, and the state government was telling them not to meet. I imagine they had to meet on the basis of being one or two offerings away from bankruptcy, right?
I would imagine that was. I don't want to be cynical, but it has to be part of the motivation. Most of those people haven't
Yeah.
got skills. They've never been trained. What does a church look like as a dispersed agency? They have no clue. It's
Right.
all about gathering, and I mean this not cynically. It's a word we used in missiological circle. It's gather and amuse.
Hmm.
That's the way most churches operate, and they've
Sure.
over relied on that mode for a long time. And so yes, no, I think a lot of them, won't know how to survive beyond a kind of gathering thing, and that's precarious at the best of times, anyway. Um, that's kind of tough, right? It's a precarious kind of way of kind of keeping, but I do actually think I have concern in this regard for a lot of my Latino and Black friends, in New York City, particularly, where I know, a lot of the churches there, they're suffering much more because and they have this phrase, if you don't meet, you don't eat. They don't have it, and they've not got their online presence. A lot of people don't have computers, so their and they're strong communities anyway. They have a strong sense of that. So it's there's something going to be broken up there. But there's also resilience in those cultures that whites don't have. They're tough. They know
Right.
what it's
Right.
like to go through tough scenarios. So again, I think we'll see them will eventually break their way through on this and find a new way of being the church.
Yeah. I'm wondering now to a certain degree. I do want to make a comment. I don't know if you've seen this, Al, but Christina Keith Perry made a comment about contact and dealing with people at different levels. We also have to remember that this is not the same level of crisis for all people. Folks who were already marginalized are being hit worse. It isn't an equal level of anxiety for everyone.
No, that's true.
Absolutely brilliant statement.
Yeah, it's very true. Yep.
And all the more important for the church to remember the poor, or whatever
Yep.
tag
Yep.
we put on that, the marginalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so how we do that, I don't know. You know, it's still early days, but yes, she's absolutely right. Yeah, we're going to have to find a ways through on this. Yep.
Yeah, it may be that we need to put on our plague doctor suits. You know, I say that jokingly, as I do have a plague doctor mask somewhere here, but I wrote a song about it called "The Plague Doctor Strut." But um, in the sense that we need to be those who are willing to go out to places that others would be afraid of. Um, I That's certainly got to be the heart of
Yeah.
coming Christianity.
Yeah. Yes. You know, like I know that, you know, we have a little sign. I don't know. It is on my thing there. Stay home. Stay home. And I think we need to respect social distancing and all that stuff. I do have just by the side a concern that social distancing will become the norm. That's going to be a problem. Touch is very important. I mean, beside that, but I do think the challenge, you know, remains even in that. You know, once we got over the immediate threat of the disease, you know, to what degree do we then, do we lose, our capacity to touch the leper in the way that Jesus
Absolutely.
certainly did? I mean, that would have been risky. Didn't touch
Right.
lepers. They were definitely discarded people. So, there's something there that, with faith, I don't know, we're going to have to be willing to risk ourselves a little more. Again, that risk liminal thing is connected.
Sure. Sure.
Without being stupid now about our families, but yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going
Well.
to be
Yeah.
wisdom, right? Wisdom.
Yeah. See, I hearken back to the beginning of public concern over the AIDS virus, and I remember there was that short window of time in which we were being told that this is possibly spread airborne. Remember that?
Yep.
So during that season, there was somebody who came up to my wife and I and asked a question if he could stay at her place, and it was somebody who was moving. His family went ahead, his wife and his young, almost like newborn, an infant, child, went ahead to set up the house, and he stayed behind and had to finish work for about 3 to 4 weeks, and he needed a place to stay, and he asked us if he could, and then he said, but I have to tell you something, there's a concern that I might have the HIV virus, and it was right when we were being told this is potentially an airborne virus, you could catch it, and he said, if you want to say no, that's perfectly fine. I understand, but I just need to put it out on the table there for you. And it took us about 30 seconds to come up with the answer, which was, well, of course you can stay. And I think how churches and Christians responded back then, at least for those, who were of an age to kind of remember that moment in time in the mid 80s. It was 1985 when that happened. Catherine Camisa puts 1985 before I say it. For those who are old enough to remember that, I think how we responded then will probably be how we respond now, unless we've had some kind of change of heart. And I hope the church has a change of heart from what it had back then.
Yeah, see, I think HIV/AIDS went with the stigma of the gay community, at least.
Of course. Of course, yeah.
COVID is anyone. So people can find themselves in this. It could easily be them that gets the COVID.
Right.
It might be different. It's more generalized, and it doesn't attach to a stigma.
Right.
Prejudice already existing.
Yeah. Well, although it seems to be developing stigmas.
But let's play this out. The church then. This is God's judgment on gay people. Well, I wonder what they think about COVID now. It's a judgment on Who exactly and
Yeah.
why? It could very well be a judgment. There could be a dimension of that. I think of an unfaithful church could very well be, but
Well,
I just wonder about those same people using that same logic. Now I wonder how
right,
that works.
right. If you're going to use it in one way, you got to use it in another. So if you've gathered together, and there's some
So
examples that you see, yeah, there's some examples you see on the internet right now. People saying we went ahead and gathered together, and everybody in the family got it, and a couple people died. So if you're going to say it one way, you've got to say it the other, and it bites back at you. Um, and of course, there's other people who would look at it as, is this the earth itself making a judgment? I live right now on the 6th floor of an apartment on East 4th Street in Long Beach. It looks directly north to LA. And it was about a month ago, I was standing out on the balcony looking onto the horizon, and it dawned on me I had been looking at the clearest skies I had seen in probably since I lived here in the in the 70s and 80s, right? Um, it the environment was cleaning up on its own. And so there's some people who, in a weird ethical excitement, are saying, "Yay, the Earth is cleaning up because people are having to stop." But
poisonous human beings.
Yeah. So I could see some people saying, "Yeah, this is God's judgment."
Maybe there's something. I'm told that Beijing has never, had such clean air in like 20, 30 years. There could be something to that, but certainly, the Earth is taking a sigh at the very least.
Right. Yeah.
There's people, there's something in that. There's that whole kind of New Age philosophy, the Gaia, the Earth philosophy, that Earth will outlive us.
Right.
And, it'll chuck us off. Eventually, human beings are poisonous, and we'll be cast off eventually. And the Earth will survive.
Yeah. And Steve Bate makes the comment, "Year of Jubilee?" question mark. And that's something that has been going around in Christian Messianic and in Jewish circles. The idea that perhaps we're in a jubilee. If only the economists would agree with that and put us on a 50-year, then things would really change, right?
Yeah, the funny thing about Jubilee, you meant to do this voluntarily. Israel never did it. Never once was the Jubilee ever done.
Right.
So, those things that God has to force us into, sabbatical, mode. So yeah, maybe it is. It's actually a reasonably good metaphor. Is that we are entering.
Yeah. So where do you think this will go in respect to some of the things that you and I have held dear? Events like Burning Man, which just this last week was canceled. There's not going to be a burn on the playa this year. There's not going to be a Glastonbury for me to go and hang out with the Iona community. There's not going to be a Coachella festival, and the hippies aren't going to be doing an all-night binge at Stonehenge while the sun, waiting for the sun to rise up over the Heelstone. Those are some pretty dramatic changes in our culture, because we've had a growing festival-going culture, and the rise of things like both festival and pilgrimage have given people a place to find deep in their spirituality. But we definitely have, that's changing, or at least it is temporarily changed.
I wonder, this all gatherings, even if, again, we get over the immediate infection, the current round of it, and we can go back to some limited version of social interactions, I still think people are not going to readily feel comfortable in larger gatherings. Conferences, gathering more than 200 people. I actually think, people are just going to, again, it's the habits we're going to learn in the 6 months of lockdown or whatever it is. Those habits might become more normative. And So I do think that Burning Man, it's funny, like the original burners would have just said death or glory and just off they go, right? It wouldn't have mattered terribly much. Now it's all kind of very cautious, but yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know how it's going to continue. I mean, certainly this year it's out of the question, but next year maybe, I don't know. But it'll be
Right,
small.
right.
It
Yeah,
definitely.
Coachella just made a plan to move it from April to October, and we'll see if October even happens.
No, I
But
can't see it. Not this year.
not yet. At least in California, and most of the people coming out of the LA area, I can't imagine.
No.
But um, who knows? We do serve mammon in this nation. Capitalism has come to a place where it's been a worshiper of mammon, right?
Yeah.
And the church has been about that to a certain degree. Which is why pastors had to keep meeting on Sundays or get arrested, could lose their church. And if the church has been about mammon to any degree, then our concern for getting back to business as normal, could that exceed our concern about human life? Especially those who are on the fringe of society and already almost in harm's way. Those two things are going to battle each other at some point.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of ethical dilemmas, boundary situations. Like sometimes, they're going to be choices that both ways are really not ideal.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm the one with the answers to that issue, is it? But yes, there will be. I mean, does gathering put people at risk? Yeah. But maybe, I don't know what we do. Do we not ever gather again? No,
Right.
I think somewhere along the line it's going to be important for people, just as people, communities have to get together. And eventually, I think the population has to get some form of immunity in the population itself. So, but I think, yeah, that's beyond me. I don't know how to go.
Hey, Michael Cooper. I see you on there. Yeah, worlds collide. Ecclesiology druids.
Oh, yes, Michael. Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty funny.
And Michael, you might not want to be associated with us.
Yeah, not to keep your job.
Yeah. Certainly, Phil, you want to watch that.
Yeah. Don't get anywhere near me. I'm in trouble. Yeah, so one of the things for me in this season that's quite a change is, already it was this way since November. I've been here in Long Beach, and my travel has stopped for now. But then, and it was already like that when this began. Now I don't know how long that's going to be. I kind of had an Emmaus Road plan ahead of me where I was going to do a walking trip through Wales. And can I go to another country? Is mission forced into the hands of Facebook, Zoom, or is it forced to the locals?
Actually, Phil, I wonder whether, Burning Man is a big event, 75,000 people now, whatever. But hey, there's Santiago and Camino, which is the other metaphor we use in the book Reformation.
Right.
It's solitary walking, or maybe 2 by 2. I don't see why that,
right.
actually might become more the order of the day. Why not take a walk like Forrest Gump?
Absolutely. Yeah.
In the morning.
Yeah, and it, of course, the Camino will now have signs all along the way, but please keep 6 foot distance.
Yeah, that's right. You might have a stick, like you push people away. But again, once we get over, I honestly, I mean, in the end of this, this is a real threat. I don't hear me as diminishing any of that, but I think the worst threat to us at the moment is the virus of fear and anxiety.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Which actually are
Right.
much more dangerous and lead to death, and in a different way, they lead to wars. And I'm much more concerned about that fear that has taken root in society, which can actually lead to terrible things. Terrible things can be done. So unresolved anxieties, nameless fears are really dangerous, and I think we need to be fear of death. You can smell that all over the place.
You're getting Kierkegaardian on us here.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one quick question before we close this. So Hope Deifel asks about missiological innovation. Couldn't we meet people where they are, including the Burning Man multiverse online space, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I think exactly where we need to go. We need to go where the people are. And always the question is, as Facebook, is this a legitimate experience of community? I would say yes. It's not perfect, but man, we can see each other's faces.
Right.
We can have a good conversation. It's something.
Sure.
If we didn't have this kind of technology, I think we'd be lonely,
Yeah.
So I think we need to do that. People going there, we need to definitely innovate.
Okay. So I'm going to let you give us a little bit of details about your book and where people can find out more about you. Why don't you do that, Al?
Actually, I don't know where it is. There's actually a book that
I will put a link in this afterwards for them to go straight to Amazon to get that book, Reframation, if they're interested. Okay.
So Reformation is this one here. Keep reforming, keep growing, and it's really about growing more into God and a big idea of human beings and gospel.
Right.
And then it does very much with the kind of the logic how you engage in places like Burning Man by discerning what God is already doing there and getting involved with that. So it's quite strong. But the one actually I think people might enjoy reading now is the one with me. I read a number of years ago with Michael Frost and myself called The Faith of Leap.
Okay.
Which is a theology of adventure and risk and courage. And it really explores this notion of liminality, communitas, this idea of liminal conditions of risk, danger, ordeal, trial, humiliation, precipitating new ways of being together. And I think it actually it was one of the lost books. I published about 5 books in 1.5 years, which is stupid. So this got to get lost in the way. But actually, it's probably the best one me and Frosty wrote together, I think. No, other than maybe Jesus. Yeah. So those two, you can get them standard.
Okay. A few people you might know jumped on here kind of at the last second, I think. Caleb Quaid jumped on, and Jimmy Calhoun. Do you know them?
Yes, I do. Yes. And,
okay, so they jumped on.
I think Keith Perry gives away because I know maybe your husband, Khaled. I don't. Yes, so we know. I love his book, Ways to Water. Brilliant. Brilliant. If it's the same Keith Perry.
Khaled. Okay. Caleb Quaid, yeah. Where is it here? Let me find the. I've lost my. Jimmy Calhoun wanted to ask: is the church going to be viewed as a community of germs?
Germs.
Germs, a community of germs. All gathering together and hugging and getting all sloppy on each other. As soon as we start doing that again, we're going to be. Oh, come on, Jimmy. You're a community of germs just by yourself, bro.
That's right. How many germs are in our bodies? I mean, just the good ones. I mean, there are billions in your tummy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we're made up of germs already. Nothing to be scared.
No, no. But in some sense, hasn't that been the problem the church has had all through history? The moment it really acts like the church, it's persecuted, and then it starts acting like the world, and everybody's all happy with it, and then people look at it and go, why do we even go to you? What do you have for us? So, okay, bro, thanks so much. This has been awesome. It's really good to see your face, man.
Likewise, brother.
Yeah,
And,
I wish it was on the playa this year,
yeah,
as opposed to just over the
I haven't
airwaves.
been
But
for 3 years, and I keep saying I gotta go one more time, and
I know I actually haven't been in the same amount of time, or maybe it's been 2 years, and um, I have been to regional burns, but it's just gotten to a point where the festivals we're working in doesn't allow me to get to Burning Man in August because I'm usually in Europe. Um, but yeah, so this has been Alan Hirsch. He rocks. I love you, bro. It's been so good hanging out with you,
Yeah,
and seeing some friends of ours pop online to see your face. They're tweaking your little cheeks there in Sydney right now, saying hello. So I'm Phil Wyman. This is the Wild Theology podcast. You can find me online. Go to YouTube and like my page, and and find me on Twitter, and all those normal places. Patreon.com/Phil Wyman as well, and that's Alan Hirsch. And where can they find you online? Do you have a place you want them to look for you?
yeah, alanhirsch.org is a place, but
AlanHirsch.org. He
Alan
is an
Hirsch.
organization all by himself. I love you, bro.
If it is, it's not a very good one. That's not what I'm doing.